Hello. Today I'm here with Matthew Kennard, the CEO of BetterLesson, also now runs BetterLesson and the recently acquired Able, which we'll get into. So lots to cover. But before we dig in on the market and what BetterLesson's up to these days, Matt, I'd love if you could just introduce yourself and talk to us about how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here, and I am a late in life ed techer. I came into the world 2018, so we're going on almost 8 years now, and I love being in this space. I think that education's been wonderful. I started in the digital core curriculum world, and I think everyone kind of laughed when I said I'm going to go over to PD. But to me, getting into the work of the professionals we're trusting to do the stage on a stage, to build really productive school buildings and school districts, right? Helping that human endeavor of teaching to me has always been really exciting. And so that's what got me here and excited about professional learning. And we're so excited to be able to add the ABLE team into the fold, being able to think about not only the professional learning and strategic planning that goes with that work, but how do you set your day? What are your instructional minutes? What are you trying to accomplish in terms of pathways for your students? Really goes hand in hand with professional learning and support for the educators. So we're really excited. This is a whole new world.
Well, I speaking for the whole ed tech community, we're grateful to have you on a number of different levels. And I appreciate in particular, like you came from the financial world, and I think you could hang with a lot of the financial folks, which it's a really tricky balance in this world, understanding like how do I build a sustainable business while serving students and teachers really well. And sometimes those things are in conflict. I think my favorite businesses are the ones where it's not, and the two work sort of hand in hand. And I think just quickly on the professional development market specifically, because it's one, especially when I was investing, that we always sort of knew existed, and we knew it had a ton of spend associated with it. And you can probably put a TAM on it for us. But we could never, there are very few examples of scaled professional development organizations. And I think BetterLesson is one of them. And so I'd love if you don't mind just taking a little bit of time to explain first what that market composition looks like, and maybe some of the things that hold back the smaller professional development orgs, and how BetterLesson's started to reach real scale.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is a highly fragmented industry, and I think and you can split into a couple of parts, right? That TAM, let's say conservatively 40 to 45 billion is being spent.
Which is nuts.
It's a
Just
lot
to
of money.
pause for a second. That is a massive market. And yet VCs are not like super historically, and we could talk about present day in a little bit, but like historically weren't super keen to fund it.
Well, it's a harder business, right? I mean, I think a lot of ed tech has been SaaS tooling, and that's great. I think there's a lot of room for B2B work. I've been in SaaS for 20 plus years, but PD is a tech-enabled service, and it always is going to have some component of service delivery. And I think that is a less attractive model sometimes for the VC world. I should give a lot of credit to Owl Ventures, who's backed me with LearnZillion and has backed BetterLesson as well, for being willing to dive into this, because I actually think scaled professional learning, if done correctly, does combine some great elements of SaaS tooling alongside of world-class service delivery. And at some point, when you're thinking about upskilling an educator, there's a human interaction that's going to happen, right? We can build in AI tools. We can think about automated content suggestions, but at its core, professional learning is going to still consist of some human-to-human exchange. And so there's always going to be a services level and component to it. And I think a lot of people shy away from that. And I understand why from a business perspective, but I actually think it's an important piece that we are potentially undervaluing. So if we think about the 40 plus billion dollars of spend, districts themselves are spending about 60% of that money. And that's in the form of instructional coaches and supports and other pieces that go along with it. And then you're thinking about another 40% of that TAM that's going to external providers. And so if we break those external providers into two buckets, I think you have kind of the edutainment providers. We're going to do a large scale workshop, and maybe it's at the local arena, or it is in a building, and you're going to have a famous speaker come in and maybe a workshop. And I think there's value to that from getting people excited about things that are going on. And then I think there's some very serious professional learning providers who are thinking about that type of work. I think the key for us at BetterLesson, where we found scale, is you can combine technology and you can combine outcomes-based work that's scaled, deeply researched, and deployable with kind of meeting the needs of districts. And I think now that we've been able to add the able tooling around schedule optimization and resource allocation, what we're really offering a district leader is control over their instructional day and control over the ability to make sure the right job embedded training is showing up for the educators who need it. And that keeps them in the classroom, that helps them be retained. And by the way, it's a dirty little secret, we don't talk about this, every other industry has figured this out, right? I came from finance, you think about medicine, you think about law, and we're talking about folks who are doing this type of hard work. Job embedded training is an actual natural part of that work. And I'm glad that we're, I think, having a very serious conversation about that for teachers now.
I hadn't thought about it like that before. It makes a lot of sense. Something Marguerite Rosa, who's a friend of Whiteboards, talks about is how COVID, one of the like sort of funny knock-on effects of COVID is a lot of our greatest instructors got sort of promoted out of direct instruction. Mm-hmm. And so it created this interesting gap where they're now in like almost managerial positions, which they don't have a ton of training for. And then schools had to hire a bunch of new teachers into the classrooms. So it created like a learning curve at both levels within the teaching workforce. And so it makes sense that you'd now be thinking all the way up to the school schedule, like how does all this stuff work? And how do we take care of all of these different classes of instructors within a district?
And it's also hard, right? We talk about things like teacher retention. We talk about structure of a school day, school district. Thinking about what your outcomes are for students is helpful not only for students, it's obviously helpful for students, right? The very best educational institutions think about defined pathways for students and give them, like, at the end of this, you should be able to, whether it's college or career, be a productive, contributing society member with a meaningful education and an investment in your skilling. It's also really important when we think about how we're asking district leaders and teachers and building leaders to think about their jobs, right? Like, what are the outcomes we're hoping for our students? How are we putting them on productive pathways that make sense? How are we thinking about aligning high wage, high availability jobs to the academic pathway that we're having students go down to make sure it's meaningful for them? So I think all of those pieces together, our goal at BetterLesson is to help you bring some structure out of the noise. If we think about an environment where you have to show ROI for your invested dollars, you have to be able to show parents and students, here's what you will get at the back end of this educational journey. Being able to give folks the tooling to make those pathways clear, communicate around that, and then help support students to get there and give educators real job embedded tools that are meaningful and useful to them, delightful for them, right? All of a sudden you can see this whole new world of what a school district can look like.
Could we do just like a little bit of prognosticating since we're imagining what a school district could look like? There are like 3 or 4 major waves sort of rocking schools right now, right? And so you can talk about like high quality instructional materials. You can talk about school choice. You can talk about, the training and staffing of districts and how that's changing. What else could you add to that? We could throw in AI. I'm sort of like, I almost don't want to cover it because it's too easy to take up the whole time. But you have all these massive waves hitting schools. So if from your seat, and I think you're closer to this than most folks, like if we go 5 years into the future, what are some of the things that like excellent schools are focused on that are maybe, are durable? Like one, maybe there are things we do today that we absolutely need to keep doing, but maybe some of the others that are less obvious to somebody who's not working at the school level.
I think to me, the exciting thing that we are seeing, and we get to work with districts across the country. We're in, I think, 38 states now, 39. Everyone is asking, I think, the right set of questions, which is we want to end with students who are college and career ready, and not just a checkbox, but like really excited to pursue whatever's next for them. And what we're looking for is help to use these waves of change as a way to propel us forward. And I think that that's an important thing to think about, because I think there's actually maybe less fear than people think and a lot more reason for optimism. One, AI will be a great tool like many other tools, right? The internet was a tool. Computers were a tool. We've had these exact same conversations multiple times. I'm pretty sure that when we decided to put like pencil sharpeners in the room, we probably had some sort of question.
Somebody complained. They're like,
right? We turned up and just like
kids don't have to sharpen their pencils anymore.
Everywhere, right? Is this going to be lead poisoning? every time we have an innovation, I think there's always a thing to say, like, and we have to control the use of AI. Absolutely, particularly when we think about emotional connection with students, right? Like there are lots of things for us to think about because our reach can often exceed our grasp. But I do think that schools are taking very responsible approaches to this. And I think that if we look at some of like the EdSafe AI work that's being done, led by Aaron Moat and others, we're going to be in a good place there. And I think we're taking the right appropriate precautions. And it's a wonderful tool for helping us kind of grok through very difficult instructional practice questions where we can look at large scale data and we can understand how approaches have worked, and we can help a person who's teaching in a very small rural district somewhere understand what millions of use cases around the country actually look like as they grok with hard instructional problems they have to deal with because they exist everywhere, but access to that data and understanding does not. So I'm not worried about AI. I think it's going to be a great part of it. I think the cool part that I am seeing is districts are starting to get very specific about wanting to have great communication with families around what that journey from sixth grade to graduation actually looks like. And I think we have broken the myth that if you're not going to a 4-year college, somehow this system has failed. Right now, economically, I think that's probably been a helper in getting us to a more reasonable place. But the other thing is 4-year college is not the only be-all or end-all endpoint, right? There are tons of great careers and jobs that may require certification, dual enrollment, bachelor's degree for sure, but also an associate's degree, opportunities to do internships, really get exposure to industry, creating great public-private partnerships with for-profit industry, being able to take advantage of really well-qualified graduates coming out of high school. What we're seeing right now is a reversion to the idea that high school should be a meaningful capstone educational experience for students from which they can go on to secondary education, from which they can go on to career, from which they can go on to a number of other very productive means. And being able to engage students and families directly in, you don't just graduate so you get a degree, but you graduate with some purpose. You graduate with a forward-looking, exciting, engaging pathway. That's what we have probably hoped for a long time. And it feels like this conversation, despite all the noise of what's happening in the world, right? Block grants, changes in the DOE, fundamentally, I'm seeing school leaders so excited about making that a reality. And to me, that is the very best thing that we could see happen. And at BetterLesson, we're here to support that. We want to give them the best tools possible to help them as educators, whether it's a school principal or a district leader or a classroom educator or instructional coach, bring their very best to that work.
Yeah, I'll totally candidly, I have really struggled with the narrative around this questioning the college degree, right? So, and we went from a point, we probably over-indexed on literally every single person needs a college degree to questioning the value. And I'm like, well, I want to land somewhere in the middle of it shouldn't be the end all be all, but it is still statistically the best path to a higher wage. So what is that middle ground? And I couldn't find great evidence for it until, and this was really cool, I saw among traditional age students, that cohort that was going, what we were sending to college, they're getting many more certifications on their path to a degree. And that made me really happy. And I think it's still a little disaggregated, so it's less sort of common knowledge, but I'm finally starting to see some evidence for that bridge of we're going to take you from 6 to 12 and we're going to set you on a path, hopefully to a cert or something that, doesn't prevent you from getting a degree, but it at least raises your salary floor during the time where you might be studying. So I've had a lot of mixed emotions. I think I'm finally coming around to this point of view that we can set up these paths, but it's been really hard for me, transparently.
And they're not mutually exclusive, right? Setting someone on a CTE pathway may also be the way that they choose to pay for college in the future, right? It may give them meaningful skills that means that a institution that they work for may send them to college or graduate school. I think the whole goal here is to give folks some real voice and choice and to make them feel engaged. And there are lots of kids who I think when we are able to point to, here are all the things you can do with this, wow, you've opened up a whole new world of things I may not have considered, whether it is I want to work and go to school. I want to do this for a period of time, and that will open up, other pathways for me to go and explore. It's that combination that I think really matters. And I think our goal is to help support our educators in saying, let's make all the pathways meaningful. Let's have them all tie in. Let's have real conversations with local industry. Let's talk to, business councils. Let's talk to for-profit industry. How do we create this idea that when I come out of high school, I'm doing so with a lot of really effective choices that work for me, work for my family, work for my community, and allow me to be an immediate contributor, in a sense, to that. And the other thing I'd also say is it's opening a door for private industry to think about where they are setting their bars for entry. BetterLesson, we've stripped away college requirements for a number of different roles that we have because, quite frankly, experiential knowledge is more important for that. And, that's okay. And I think we can remove some of that stigma ourselves. And I think that's also part of the load that lands on employers.
Yeah, I like that framing a lot. One more philosophical question for you, and then we can do a couple of quick hits to round this out. So thinking about the past sort of 10, 15 years that I've been watching the education industry, I think a bunch of the hype and a fair amount of the progress that the industry has made has been very sort of student oriented. Even among those B2B SaaS tools that you mentioned earlier, usually there was a connection either directly to a student or directly to a parent, or in some way, shape, or form, riding to the individual level. One of the things with AI that I've got a couple of different hypotheses for why this might be the case, but I don't have a strong degree of confidence in it yet. It feels like a lot more of the tooling that's getting hype and hopefully usage is more teacher oriented. So I'm curious if you have any sort of early thoughts, and I get a lot of this is sort of educated guessing, so don't worry. But like, why do you think I might be perceiving that kind of focus? Do you think it's real, and why do you think I'm seeing that?
I do think we're seeing a productive conversation shift around everything that happens in a school isn't always oriented towards students, but can be oriented towards educators. And that's okay. I think it's actually fine for that to be the case. We know that there's a high correlation between a really strong educator and great outcomes for students. So I think we want to continue to lean into that. And I think we want to continue to support the idea that what we ask of our educators and our leaders in buildings and our leaders in districts, like, they need support to do their jobs. They need tools to do their jobs more efficiently. And so we really think about this needs to be a part of that conversation. How do we fund districts to support the needs of the adults who are asking to do the work? And I think that's an okay balance for us to hit. A lot of our investment goes to students, but we are also still investing in our students when we invest in the adults in the classroom, because that is what helps create the magic of what we're hoping to see in the classroom.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Two more quick ones. First is, I could make a case that the market stinks, the edtech market stinks. I could make a case that the edtech market is great, right? Magic School raised whatever it was, $50 million a month or two ago. So I can make both cases. I do not run a company in the edtech market, so I have a limited perspective in that sense. As somebody who runs, a larger organization in the market, what are your thoughts on the overall progressions? And, caveat emptor, yada, yada, but like, just what's your gut instinct on how the market has moved?
The first one, to this is not investing advice.
Exactly.
I would say
we're not lawyers, we're not investors, et cetera.
The market's shifting. I think we're seeing changes in federal funding guidelines. I think we're going to see block grants. We're going to see states having a lot more choice and voice. I think what it's going to do is push edtech, which has kind of operated the same way for a very long time, to really start thinking about how we are showing ROI to school boards, to districts, et cetera. And I think we're going to have to continue to do that. And I think the market, the market is the market, and there are going to be things that happen with it. I think what you're going to see is probably a little bit of consolidation. I think you're going to see more demand out of the tools that are being bought, and better usability, ease of use, ability to demonstrate the effectiveness. But I think that's okay. And I think that edtech will survive this, just like it's survived 08 and survived other times of like real strife. But anything that also helps us be leaner, be better, be more focused on results for educators, there is something to be said for that being important.
Makes sense. So sort of measured optimism to...
Yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Measured optimism. I feel good about that.
Yeah. I like that too. And, probably healthy for you to believe that. Last one, just a fun one. Are there any new tools that you're either using personally or you're seeing in the marketplace that folks might not have heard of that, you'd love to get some attention?
Listen, what I would say to this is for anyone we're all working in these like really hard slots. I think two things that have been important. One is AI tooling for your calendar that has like absolutely changed the way I think about blocking out my day. And then
Do you use Motion?
I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also I'd say a small thing, just a beautiful round kitchen timer to time block yourself. Sometimes it's
Interesting.
a nice option. So a little bit of old school, a little bit of new, but I'm overall pretty happy with it.
I like that. Yeah, and I think at least being aware of how you're spending your day and trying
Yeah.
to say like, what are my tendencies? Are those good?
Yes.
Are those less helpful, et cetera? I think it's good self-awareness.
I would agree.
So thank you, Matt, for joining. Really appreciate the time and hope we can do this again sometime soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt.
Awesome.